who are on Samach Aleph Amid Beis, right? Like there's the two dots in middle of the wide lines. We're going to start along two lines before that. Itmar. If someone is Oived Avodah Zarah, but he does it out of because he admires someone, he's doing it to please them, or he's scared of someone. Abaya mechayev. Abaya says he's still chayev. Rava Amar Potter. Rava says he's Potter. Abaya mechayev da palcha. Abaya says whatever your reason is, in the end you did the avodah, so you're chayev. Rava Amar Potter. Yikabel le'be'elika in iloy. Rava says, listen, he wasn't. In order to be chayev for being Oived Avodah Zarah, you have to be being Oived, really care about the Avodah Zarah. This person doesn't care about the Avodah Zarah, he cares about his friend or the person he's scared of. So he says you're not going to be chayev. Simin avad yishtachav l'mashiach. Amar Abaya, mino amino. Abaya says, how do I know that if you're Oived Avodah Zarah me'avo me'yira you're chayev? The Tanan. Oived Avodah is kechavim. Someone who's Oived Avodah Zarah, echad Oived. Our Mishnah said, one of the first things the Mishnah said before it said the dinim of all the different, if you do one of the avodas of a carbon, that you're going to be chayiv even if it's not the derech of being oived that avodah zarah. So the first thing the Mishnah said was echad ha'oived, whether someone who's oived. What does that mean? We had the Gemara asked before echad ha'oived. The Gemara now is starting fresh. My love. What does it mean, echad ha'oived? What does it mean, someone who is being oived? What does that mean? My love, echad ha'oived me'avo me'yira. Doesn't that? So Abai is suggesting that's an extra phrase in the Mishnah. L'chayra, he says it must mean someone who's being oived, even me'avo me'yira. He's doing it out of fear or love. Rava amalach loy. Rava will say, like we answered before in the Gemara, that it's first saying someone who's oived in the way that the avodah zarah is normally avod, then he's going to be chayiv for avodah zarah. But if he's oived in a way that he's not normal, then he normally wouldn't, unless, like the Mishnah said, unless it's one of the parts of the one of the ways of being doing avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. If he does such an avodah l'shem and avodah zarah, even though that's not the normal way of being oived that particular idol, he's still going to be chayiv. Abaya, Amar Abaya. So Abaya says I'll bring you another came to an impasse with Rava on the last one. He says, I'll give you another reason. How do I know my rule that someone who's oived me'avo me'yira is going to be chayiv? Tanya, lo yishtachov lahem. The pasuk says you shouldn't bow down to them. Lahem iyata mishtachov, la'ata mishtachov la'adam kamoischa. But you could be mishtachava. There's a brisa. The brisa says you could be mishtachava to another person. It means when you walk into the king and you bow down to the king, that's not avodah zarah. That's just bowing down to a person. That's a sign of respect. Yachal afilu nevad kahaman. It's very timely. The brisa says maybe even if the person who he's bowing down to sets himself up as a deity, he's claiming he's a god, like Haman did. Haman said, everyone has to bow down to me as a avodah zarah. Maybe on that also there's no chiyuv, because it says lahemiyata mishtachava, but not to a person, even if the person is treating himself as avodah zarah. So we learn from a pasuk. It says loyavde. You shouldn't worship them, meaning people. There are cases in which you're going to be chayiv for bowing down to a person, and that is someone who sets himself up as a idol.
How did Chomer get away with that?
How did what?
How did Chomer get away with it? I mean, he wasn't the king. There was a Achashverosh. I mean, I understand Paro made himself.
He was saying he's a god. Listen, Achashverosh was happy. He said, you could make yourself religion, you could do whatever you want. As long as I still control the army and I have the purse, you could make yourself whatever god you want to claim to be. Haman was saying, bow down to me out of that I'm like I'm a god. But Achashverosh didn't care. That's his nonsense. What difference does it make to him? Well, you're thinking, how could a king ever allow someone to, if he set himself up as a
Yeah,
god, that means he's setting himself over the king?
yeah, of course. I mean, it compromises the king's position. He's only a
That's
king.
only,
We have a god.
that's only because you take religion seriously.
Yeah, but he's taking his kingdom seriously. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want his head to roll.
Eh, I'm more cynical than you. I think people can, like they say, separation of religion. The president could go into a prayer meeting, and there's somebody he has to sit there listening to the guy darshan to him. So he doesn't. No one believes that this local priest has more power than but that's what the president has to do. He has to show whatever. I don't think the Achashverosh was too worried about this.
Yeah,
He was
okay.
more worried about Haman's money than he was about his. But in any case, the Gemara asks, how could you say afilu nevad kahaman v'haman miyira hava nevad? The Gemara says that nobody really believed Haman was some kind of god, that he had any powers. They just went along with him because they were scared he was going to get there. He was going to chop off people's heads. That's why they bowed down to him. So you see that someone who's um, Ivan Meir is still chayiv, right? We're saying that it's never kahaman. Rava kahaman v'loy kahaman. Rava says no. We just use Haman as an example. Kahaman do you gufe avodas kahaman. We just meant to say that Haman was not just he was having people bow to him because of his position in the government. He was having them bow to him as an avodah zara. V'loy kahaman dilu Haman meira v'hachaloy meira. But Haman, it's true, Haman was meira, but we're not talking about that part. We just wanted to bring an example of someone who was being never. Ba'am Rabbi, a third raya to Abai. Amino, the Tanya. Kohen Mashiach ba'avodas kechavim. So there are numerous categories. The pasuk says that you bring a carbon chatas, but there are numerous categories, the numerous ways of subdividing the chatas. First of all, there's a distinction between a kohen gadol and a parallel davar. That in those things you be the par. That's when you bring the paramanas rafim. Secondly, there's a distinction between those shkagas, which is a shagig where the person thought he was doing what he thought he was doing was okay, and he did it. He didn't realize he was doing something that was awesome, or he didn't realize he was doing it. Whatever the case may be. But there's another distinction which applies by what the pasuk is talking about by the Par Kohen Mashiach and the Par Halam Davashal Tzibur. Both those are talking about where the person paskined, either the Bezdin paskined that the thing is mutter, or the Kohen Gadol himself paskined that this is mutter to him. So Kohen Mashiach ba'avodas kechavim, and then there's a third distinction also. There's a separate karbanis. The Torah gives a separate karbanis for a shaygig of all the mitzvahs and a shaygig for avodas kechavim. So send a brayso. Kohen Mashiach, a Kohen Mashiach. So the pasuk that says you bring a par Kohen Mashiach, it's talking about a Kohen who paskin the din on a stam, a mitzvah, that it's mutter and it was really aser, and he did it. So he has to bring a par Kohen Mashiach. What happens was avodas kechavim. If he did that by avodas kechavim, it wasn't stam a mitzvah. Rabbi Yomer b'shiggas ma'isa. So Rabbi says he's going to be mechoyev even if he made a shiggas ma'isa, meaning that a kohen gadol, if he makes a mistake, if he says something is mutter and he does it, he's only going to be mechoyev if it's a helam davar, if he made a mistake and he thought it was mutter. But if he did something that he thought he was doing a act that, let's say he thought he was cutting he thought he was hitting a person, and which I don't know if this is a good example, but he thought he was hitting a person. He didn't realize it was his father, and he's really being over. So that's a shiggas ma'isa. He made a mistake in the ma'isa, not in the psak, that he thought that something that was not allowed was allowed. So generally, If it's not avodas kechavim, the kohen gadol goes off scot-free. He doesn't bring a chatas for that. The chatas of a par helam davar of a kohen gadol means that on stam chatoyis, stam lavin, a kohen gadol only brings a par helam davar when he made a mistake in the psak. But if he made a shiggas ma'isa, if the action was b'shagig, he doesn't bring. So Gemara asks, does that also apply by avodas kechavim? Avodas kechavim is not part of the. There's a whole separate system of. There's a whole separate rule, and there's a different carbon that you bring for it. So the question is, does that also apply that it's only by a helam davar for a kohen gadol, or is it also by shiggas ma'isa? So Rabbi said b'shiggas ma'isa, v'chamim b'helam davar. B'shavin sheb'seira kiyachad. But both of them agree that the carbon that the kohen gadol brings is the seira that a yachid will always bring for avodah zarah, which is different than what did they bring for a stam lav. So the kohen gadol, whether it's only for helam davar, or if it's also by shiggas ma'isa, they're both going to agree that you bring a seira kiyachad. B'shavin maybe even asham tali, and they also agree that you don't bring an asham tali because it's a yachid would bring an asham tali, but that's only doesn't apply to when a kohen gadol is over. So but the Gemara asks, when we're saying that the kohen gadol, this machlokes that Rebbe and the Chacham had, the Rebbe said the kohen gadol could even be mechoyev for shiggas ma'isa by avodas kechavim. What's the case of where the kohen gadol made, like I said, you could have a shgaga when someone, for example, he puts on shatnez and he doesn't realize that it's shatnez. So that's not a helam davar that he made a mistake in the psak. That's a shiggas ma'isa. He did it wrong.
What's helam davar?
Helam davar is that he forgot what the halacha is. He made a mistake on what the halacha is. He thought that something that's mutter is asa. I'm sorry, it's asa is mutter. But what's shiggas ma'isa of avodas kechavim? How can you do a ma'isa of avodas kechavim that that it's not that he thought something was mutter, but he was over avodah zarah but b'shay hechidami. And the Gemara says it's the obvious question. If he was walking past the church and he thought it was a shul and he bowed down to it, he's not being, in order to be over avodah zarah, there has to be a certain amount of intent. If a person is trying to din Hashem, he's trying to dive into Hashem, it can't be that would be a mice of avodah zarah. Ella the chazan drata v'shtachaloi. So Elamai, it's not talking about it was a basic knesset. He saw a statue and he bowed down to it. And he thought it was like a statue of George Washington. So he did a respectful bow to it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's like we said. It's like bowing to a king. But it turned out it was really a statue of Neptune, and it was a Greek god. It's like, if he knew what was a statue, it was a religious statue, then he's amazing. Again, it's really the same thing. If he didn't accept it as a deity, he was just bowing down out of respect. Again, it's not being Oived Avodah Zarah. So what is going to be the case of someone being a shaygig from shaygig in the din of in the Maisa of Avodah Zarah? Allah me'ava me'yira. So Rabbi says it must be that it's talking about someone who was Oived someone from Ava and Yira, meaning he did it because he loved a certain person or he was scared of a person. And that person said, I want you to go be Oived Avodah Zarah, and he did so. And this person, this is where it gets a little hard to. It's a little bit different than the way I've explained it till now. So let's see the Rashi. So on the top line, he knew that there's an Isra Avodas Kechavim. So it's not considered he was Helam Davar, that he didn't know the rule that Oived Kechav, that you're not allowed to be Oived Avodas Kechavim. The only part that he didn't know the halacha from was the halacha of Ava and Yira, that you're not allowed to be Oived from someone forcing you to do it. It's a very he's threading a narrow path. He's saying this is going to be a shgaga, a shiggas maisa, even though his mistake is in halacha. His mistake is that he thinks that if someone's forcing you to be ovid, you're allowed to do so. And the truth of the matter is, if you're not allowed to do so, it's one of the things that that you're not allowed, you have to get yourself killed over. So he should have not listened to it. But Rashi says that's not considered helam davar, because it's just on a specific part of Avodas Kechavim. It didn't have helam davar. If Ruvain told Shimon, go be over this Avodah Zarah, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to punch you in the face. And Shimon did so. This is the Machlekes Abaye and Rav. That's what we started from. Abaye says Yechayev for Avodah Zarah, and Rav says Yepater. He wasn't being over. He was just doing it because the person told him to do it. The reason why this is going to be considered to be that what's going to be this example of being mishtachav el avodah zarah that's considered shigas ma'isa. It's where the person made a mistake on this specific din of being ovid mi'ava miyera. He thinks that it's mutter and it's really aser. So we say that's considered a shigas ma'isa because he's doing the ma'isa of avodah zarah. He knows he's doing avodah zarah, but he thinks that this gets him off the hook. That's considered he's doing a ma'isa of avodah zarah b'shayik. The case of helam davar means a more general helam, that he thinks that avodah zarah as a rule is mutter.
What's the case?
The case of Ava Meira. So again, this is what we started with. It was the last thing we said yesterday. This is Machlekes Abaye and Rav. If one person forces a second person, or where Ruvain Ruvain loves Shimon, and Shimon says, "Let's go be over Avodah Zarah. I want you to be over Avodah Zarah." Reuven is scared of Shimon, and Reuven is over Avodah Zarah because he's scared of Shimon. So either from love for Shimon or from yira of Shimon, he does Avodah Zarah. Abaye says Yechayev because in the end he was ovid, and Rava says Yepater because you can't be Avodah Zarah. He has no intention of accepting this as in any way as a god. He's just doing it because someone told him to. That's the disagreement between Abaye and Rava. So Abaye is trying to bring a raya from here that this is the only way you could understand this din, that there's such a thing as avodah zarah, that's a shigas maisa, is a person made a mistake on this specific din of me'ava me'yira, which is only a small subset of avodah zarah, but he basically knows that avodah zarah is, so it's not helam davar, it's considered shigas maisa. Rama amalach loy. But I'm a mutter. We're talking about where he says, I thought that avodah zarah was mutter. In fact, I'm a mutter. Hainu helam davar. We're trying to find a case of shigas maisa. How can you say he thought it was mutter? That's exactly what helam davar is. He thought that the halacha is that it's mutter. So tomorrow, but I'm a mutter legamri helam davar. That which we say that a helam davar. So this is you see this din of helam davar. This distinction between helam davar and shigas maisa. There's a continuum. So helam davar, the way Rava understands it, is the only thing that's called helam davar is if the person said there's no such thing as avodah zarah. That's helam davar. He says, even though the whole chumash is full of isurim of helam davar, somehow this guy who's the Kohen Gadol never read any chumash, and he thinks avodah zarah is purely mutter. That's called a helam davar. But anything less than that, if he thinks that there's some rules, it's only partial, that's already shigas maisa. Ki mitzvahs ubitul mitzvahs, helam davar, helam davar ki mitzvahs ubitul mitzvahs is going to be a shigas maisa. Tani Rav Zakkai kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. Nudin. Rav Zakkai said in front of Rav Yochanan. This is a very famous Gemara that comes up all the time, and it's extremely one of these things that, again, it's hard to understand it unless you learn it in the place, which is here. Zivach v'kitev v'nisach v'shtachava b'helam echad. if someone did all different kinds of avoidus, the avoidus that you do for a carbon, and he did them l'avodah zara. He shechted and he burned something and he poured it out. So all that we said in the Mishnah, these are the examples that you're chayav for avodah zara, and he did all of them and he bowed down, and it was all in one forgetting. Ein chayav al achas. He said you only chayav one. He's only chayav one for all the different avodas. Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Poik tani lebrach." He said, "Go say this outside the base medrash. This is incorrect, and you're saying the wrong thing. Don't say such incorrect rulings in my base medrash, because you're going to be chayav separately." Amar Rabbi Abba, Hadam Rav Zakkai. Rabbi Abba wants to understand why was Rabbi Yochanan so upset with Rav Zakkai, and he said this is an incorrect ruling. So Machlokes Rabbi Yosef Reb Nosson. This is the famous Machlokes Rabbi Yosef Reb Nosson that we've come across in Shabbos, the Tanya. Havara l'laviosas. Divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says the pasuk, as we know, all the malachas on Shabbos are asa, and then the Torah says, "Lo savaru es b'chol mashveiseichem." So what does the Torah have to say specifically? Isser of havara, of burning something on Shabbos. He says l'laviosas. It's coming to tell you, even though normally if a person would be over on one of the malachas, he would get, if he does it b'mezid with hasra and edim, he gets misa, and if he does it, if there's no hasra, he gets karas. Havara, the Torah says, tells you havara, lo savara, they tell you it's not going to be included in that karas. Rather, if he's over it without hasra, it's just going to be a lav. He's not going to be mechuyev karas. That's what Rabbi says. It's downgrading the Isser of Havara. Rav Nosson says it's coming to tell you that you could be mechuyev separately on each malacha that you do. It means if you do a bunch of them behelam echad, if a person, if he cuts something on Shabbos, he shechs an animal on Shabbos, and then he harvests some grain on Shabbos, and the whole time it's all in the same mistake. He's a mechayev a different chatas for each one. So Lamanda Marvar Lalav Yatzis, Ishtachav Anami Lalav Yatzis. According to the Mandam who says Havar is Lalav Yatzis, so when the Torah says over here what where Zakkai said, Zivach Kitav Nisach Ishtachav Elechad and Echayev Elachas, the Chayra Ishtachav over here is also saying the same din, that it's only going to be mechayev karas. It's only going to be mechayev a lav. It's not going to be mechayev karas. But Lamanda Maravar Lachalak Yatza. According to Mandam that says by Shabbos, when the Torah says a Isser of Havara, it's coming to say you're going to be mechayev separately for each one. So Hashtachava Nami Lachalak Yatza.
Is it possible that singles out the Shtachava?
Yeah, right. That was we saw the psukim back over here.
Last week we said.
Yeah. We had the whole discussion at the different avodas, and then the pasuk said ishtachava separately, and we went back and forth. Which one is the klal? So we ended up that the klal it was saying that anything that's in an avodah that's done in the Beis Hamikdash you're going to be chayiv on, even if it's not the way. And the ishtachava was separate to tell you that it doesn't apply to all the other ways of showing fealty to avodah zarah. But anyways, we had a separate pasuk for ishtachava. So we're saying, let's say the ishtachava, just like havara is l'chalak yatzis, so ishtachava also is l'chalak yatzis, and to tell you that you're mechuyev for each one. And then, so why was Rabbi Yochanan disappointed with Rav Zakkai that he said you're going to be mechuyev separately for each zivach v'kitav nisach v'shtachava elam echad?
So it was passing like Rav Nosson.
He's passing like the Mandama who says that it's l'chalak, that it's l'lav yatzis, and therefore there's no pasuk to say l'chalak. So that's why he says yechayev ein yechayev alachas.
Sorry, so that's Rav Yossi. Okay.
So Gemara, Maskal Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, well, how could you ask on Rabbi Yochanan that he didn't agree with Rabbi Yosef, with Rav Zakkai, because you're saying that maybe Rav Zakkai held like Rabbi Yossi, That which Rabbi Yossi didn't say it's l'chalik yatzas by havara, but rather he said it's lav yatzas. The nafkalei chilik malachas me'achas mehina, because he has a different pasuk. He doesn't learn it from the extra pasuk that it says there, that it says an extra time, an extra isser for malacha. But there's a separate pasuk that tells you that l'chalik me'achas mehina. Because the Torah says, now this is obviously a lot of extra words in psukim. It says, as we're going to see in the Brisa, it says, first of all, it says achas. It doesn't have to say achas, and then it says me'achas from one of them, and it says heina, and it says mehina. It could have just said, should have just said, also. So you have a lot of extra limudim here. So that's what the Bryce is going to say. The time, but also me'achas mehina, pa'amim shechayiv achas al kulam, pa'amim shechayiv al kol achas v'achas. This is a general foreshadowing summary of what we're going to be saying in the Bryce. Sometimes a person is going to be chayiv. He's going to be chayiv one lav or one chatas for doing a bunch of different isurim. Sometimes he's going to be chayiv on each issur that he does. My time of the Rav Yossi, what is the explanation of Rav Yossi? D'chsiv also me'achas me'heina. Achas me'achas. Heina me'heina. So we have, like we said, those are four limudim. It says achas and me'achas, and heina me'heina. So achas she heina, ve'heina she achas. So now we're going to go through them. What is that? Achas Shimon. What is the case of achas where he's chayiv one? That's where he did an entire Isser. He wrote down the word Shimon, which is a full word. That's a lav. That's a full malacha. You're chayiv for it. That's pretty straightforward.
Okay, this is going on right now in Rabbi Yossi.
This is the Rabbi Yossi of the Brisa.
That holds that what?
That we're saying that Rabbi Yossi is going to learn out. We're going to see in a second. This is all going to come back. We're going to see that he holds from achas me'ina. You'll learn a chiluk. You are for each thing separately, a separate lav l'chalak. So he doesn't need the pasuk he doesn't need havara to tell you l'chalak. So it could be that's the only reason why. It's not that Rabbi Yossi would say taka that by avodah zara. This is why Rabbi Yochanan was having a taina, that the hashtachava by avodah zara would be l'chalak. But over here, it's not necessary. By Shabbos, it's not necessary because we have a different pasuk, a different way to learn out l'chalak. And this is going to be a long brisa to get to that, just to demonstrate that he holds that you could learn that from achas mehena l'chalak. So the first thing is, so achas is Shimon. One, from the fact that the pasuk says achas, that tells you if he wrote the word Shimon. Me achas, or from one, meaning he didn't do an entire malacha, is shemi Shimon. We wrote the word shame from Shimon, which he intended to write Shimon, but he didn't finish writing the word. So he did part of a word, so he's still going to be mechayiv achatas for doing that b'shayim. Heina avos. Heina tells you that there are different avos, that if a person does all the different, when the Torah says you shouldn't do malacha, it means every malacha that was done in the Beis Hamikdash, each one is a separate av. Meheina toildas, and meheina is the toildas, the things that are similar to the avos that you learn out from the avos. So then we said achas shehiena. The Brisa said there are cases where he does one and he's going to mechayev multiple things. Zod and Shabbos v'shigdus malachas. When he did it, he was over Shabbos. He knew it was Shabbos, but he didn't know that this malacha is asa. So that's going to be he's going to be over for each malacha that he did. So you see, you're learning out. This is where you see l'chalak. If you do a bunch of different malachas on Shabbos, you chayev for each one. That's achas shehiena, and this is really our kasha. Heina shehiachas, and what's heina shehiachas that the Brisa said? Shigga Shabbos v'zad malachas. He didn't know it was Shabbos, but he knew that there's a bunch of malachas, but he thought there was Friday instead of Shabbos. So then he's only going to be mechayev one because it was all one mistake. Aval hacha. Now we're finally getting back to our question. Over here, we don't have another way to learn out that to be mechalik by avodah zara. everyone would agree ishtachva is lachalik yatsa, and that would be why Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with Rav Zakkai. He sent him out of base medrash for saying in Michayev only one. In fact, the Gemara, obvious question. This pasuk of achas mehena, me'achas mehena. It's not a pasuk by Shabbos. It's a general rule. It's giving a rule throughout the Torah. So chelik mos davos chav nami typically me'achas mehena. Why? It's almost like a circular reasoning. We said that the reason why Rabbi Yossi, he said over there that you by Shabbos, because you can learn it out from me'achas mehena, but over here you don't have me'achas mehena. Why don't you have me'achas mehena by avodah zarah the same way and say that it's lechalik from achas mehena? So, how would it work? Is where do you have that? It seems like the Gemara understands that entire brisa, the whole din of achas mehena has to be able to apply to an isser in order for it to, for the drush of achas mehena to apply. So you have to have all the different categories, the different limudim that we had me'achas mehena to apply to that isser. So the Gemara is going to go through it. Achas is vicha, you shecht an animal. Me'achas would be menacha. Just like we said before, that achas is shame, shimon, and me'achas is shame, where you did a partial avodah. So this would be a partial malacha. Over here, the avodah would be, instead of breaking the animal's neck, by shechting it, you break a stick in front of the avodah zarah, which is somewhat similar, which is a portion, it's a chelik of breaking an animal. You didn't break an animal, you broke something else in front of the avodah zarah. Heina, and what's heina? Ovis. Zivuach kita nisach v'shtachavo. Like we said, doing any kind of avodah that would be done in the Beis HaMikdash, or bowing down, these are the ovis of avodah zarah. And meheina told us. What's a tilde? I'm sorry. I said it wrong before. Achas, I have to go retract a little. Me'achas zvicha means shechting. Me'achas simanechad, you shechted an animal, but you only cut one of the two simanim in the animal's throat. So you did partial avodah. So that's like shech. Heina is avos, zivach kita v'nisach v'shtachavo. Those are the avos. Mehena told the shever makal lefanef. He broke a stick in front of the avodah zarah. That's similar to the. It's like a tolda of shechting an animal. You break the neck, you break a stick, so it's also going to be chayiv. Achashi heina, and then the last part of the brisa. How do you have that he did one thing and he's going to be chayiv multiple isurin? Zadna avodah chav v'shigas avodah heina shigas avodah. That's where he knew that it's also to do avodas kechavim, but he made a shkaga legabe the avodas. He didn't know that these particular avodas was also. Heina shiachas shigas avodah, shigas avodas kechavim bezaden avodas. The other way around. He was general rule avodas kechavim, and he's bezaden on avodas. Now I'm not really teaching this too much. Hay shigas avodas kechavim hey chidami. We have this is back to the question that we keep having. What does it mean he was a shaygig on avodas kechavim? But he knew that this avodah is awesome. If you don't understand the whole concept of avodah kechavim, you don't think it's awesome. How can you think that this avodah is an avodah? There's no such thing as avodah kechavim. You could have a beis haknesi v'shtachav. If you're saying that he thought it was a beis hakneses and it was really a church, and he bowed down to the Hari Libel Shemayim, that's not avodah zarah at all. El the chazan drat of a sagadlei. He saw a statue, and he thought it was a statue of a person, but it was really a statue to an avodah zarah. If he knew it was a statue of a avodah zarah, then he's amazed. He like kabbalah like klomu. Elamai, it has to be that his mistake was, like we said before, that he thought that it's mutter to be oived me'ava me'ira, and that was his whole mistake. That's only good according to Abaye that it's still going to be chayiv. So that was the shigas avodah zarah. He knows that you're not allowed to be avodah zarah, but he thought that you could do something. When you do it me'ava me'ira, it's meaningless. And so according to Abaye that says you're chayiv, so that would be the case where he's a shaygig legabe avodah zarah, that he did it me'ava me'ira and he thought that was okay. But he's not going to be chayiv for each separate avodah because it was all from the same mistake. So again, we're stuck. Elamai must be talking about where he thought that the whole thing of avodah is mutter. He thought that avodah zara itself is mutter. He thought there's no avodah chacham, and even though, so the Gemara is going to ask, how could that be? How could you be choyev? This is a shaila that was brought earlier. This would be dependent on a different shaila. Tifshet deba minei Rava merav Nachman. Let's answer the question that Rav asked Rav Nachman. Helam zeh v'zeh biyadai ma'u. What happened if someone made a mistake both in he made a mistake both in the avodah, and whether avodah zara is mutter, and he made a mistake both legabi Shabbos, whether it's Shabbos or not, and he also made a mistake about the malacha. He didn't know that this thing was a malacha. Mal. And the question was, are you going to be chayiv? Are you going to say, since he made a mistake, legabi the whole din of Shabbos, it's all considered one helem? Or do you say, since he also made a mistake, legabi the malachas, he's going to be chayiv for each malacha separately? Tifshet ein chayiv alachas. Let's bring a raya from here. We're saying that if you made a mistake, legabi the avoidus, and he also, he made a mistake, but he used oimer mutter. He said I think avodah zara is mutter. And he also didn't happen to know the halachas of avodah zara, and he thought that he didn't know that let's say bowing down and bringing a carbon shechting. He didn't know that these are separate things. The Gemara says if he thinks that avodah zara is mutter, how could he think that the avodas? How could he be making a mistake about the different avodas? It must be that it's possible to have that you could be mistaken both about the actual original thing as well as make a mistake also on the details, even though you don't know that the thing itself is awesome. So let's see, Tifshet ein chayiv alachas. Let's bring a raya from here, because this is going to be the same thing as a mistake where he thought it wasn't Shabbos, and he also didn't know that the avodas, the malachas are separate malachas. He didn't know that each malacha was awesome, because it's impossible to think avodah zara is asur, but think that that you don't have an analogy. A Shabbos you could have, he made a mistake. It's today's Shabbos. He didn't know today was Shabbos, but he knows that all these different malachas are asur. Avodah zara, there's no such thing. So it has to be that he thought avodah zara is mutter, and then if that's the case, he doesn't think that each separate thing is asur. You can't think that zivuch is asur, but haktara is mutter. He has to have been mistaken on that also. So you see that ein chayiv alachas. So it must be that you only chayiv one, even when you make a mistake on the you're only going to be chayiv one when you make a mistake on the original thing. So I'm going to kasha. The tifshet. Someone says, okay, ein economy. What's so terrible if we're able to be pashat? The question that Rava had to Rav Nachman. Gemara says we have a different problem, right? Our whole point was that we're saying that this, let's say a heina mehena is coming to tell you l'chalik by avodas gechavim. Can you really say that? Mashiach par by achas mehena. It says the pasuk continues and it says what the carbon chatas is going to be, and it says by par kohen Mashiach. By Mashiach you bring a par or benasi sar or nasi who makes a mistake. He brings a sar, ubi yachid kispa, yachid brings a kispa, seira. Those are all talking about where you made a mistake on generic labin. We said, legabe avodas gechavim, you bring a seira. Now the psukim of achas mehena are not talking about bringing a seira. It's talking the actual chatoyis that the pasuk describes are the ones that we said, a seer for a par, a par for kayin, and a seer for the nasi. Doesn't talk about a seera, so it can't be talking about avodah zara. V'suloi midi. So therefore, ye'ena chanami. That's a good kasha, and there's no way. So Rav Yochanan is justified. We can't say achas mehena is going to be the source for lechalik even by avodah zara. Okay. Ki asar of Shmuel by Yehuda Amar. Amar Hachi. Hachitana Kame. This is the way he had. He had a different version of the same discussion. Chayv b'Shabbos mishar mitzvahs. B'Shabbos mitzvahs Shabbos. Shabbos has a chaymer of other mitzvahs, and there's a other mitzvah of a chaymer of Shabbos. Chayv b'Shabbos, Shabbos also shtayim b'Mechad chayv al kolachas v'yachas. You could be chayiv separately on each. If you do two malachas in one forgetting. Masha'enke b'Shabbos. Chayv b'Shabbos, and there's a chaymer in Shabbos. The Shabbos is shagag v'lo miskaven chayiv. If someone was essentially, the way Rashi explains it is he was a misasik. He thought, like we're going to explain later on, he thought he was pulling out, he was picking up a plant, and he didn't realize it was attached to the ground, and he pulled it out of the ground. Then by Shabbos, you're not mechayev. This is not the regular miskaven where he wasn't intending to be over. But this is a miskaven that he wasn't intending to do the action at all. What does it mean that we said, the first thing that we said, that on Shabbos, if you do two things, behel mechad, you chayiv on each one. If he did two separate malachas, which the analog in other mitzvahs would be that he ate fats and he ate dam. Hachatarti. Hachatarti mechayiv. Hachatarti mechayiv. On both of them, you're mechayiv too. If you forgot that you're not allowed to eat chaylev and you forgot you're not allowed to eat dam, you're talking about mechayiv too by other mitzvahs also. What does it mean that you only chayiv one by shar mitzvahs? Dachu chaylev, b'chaylev, that he ate two times chaylev. The gavas gabe Shabbos, the avik tzira tzira. Hachachad mechayiv, hachachad mechayiv. If you did the same halacha twice within the same helam, by Shabbos also only mechayiv one. So what's this example that we're saying on Shabbos you mechayiv two, and if you also shtayim helam echad, that legabe Shabbos you chayiv two, and other things you're mechayiv one. That's why Rabbi Yochanan said to Zakkai, it's a whole different version of the discussion. My question. He did two malachas. And by what does it mean by shar mitzvahs? You do two things on one, and one forgetting, you only mechayiv one. It's like Rav Ami by avodas chachamim. Rav Ami, viva v'kidav nisra b'helam echad ein chayiv alachas. Now we have Rav Ami saying the same memory that we said b'shem Rav Zakkai before. Now we're saying it b'shem Rav Ami. He says you only chayiv one. So that's going to be the that we say there's no l'chalik yotzes l'gabi avodah zara, and you only chayiv one if you do multiple types of avodah. So you can't say that this brisa, that this chaymer Shabbos mishar mitzvahs is that you chayiv two by one if you do two b'helam echad. Because what about the sefer? The sefer chaymer b'shar mitzvahs shagag v'lo miskaven chayiv shablo miskaven, and it says if you shagag v'lo miskaven you chayiv, and shagag v'lo miskaven heichidami. What does that mean that you were shagag? You made a shagag without intention, meaning misasik. That by Shabbos you're going to be chayiv, and we said by shar mitzvahs you're potter. If it's talking about avodas chachamim, it's not true. Either because of a beis haknesu v'shtach v'lo harei bil shamayim. Like we said already, there's a third time that you can't make a mistake. If you think that you're being Oibed Hashem, you're certainly not going to be chayiv. El dechazan adat v'sagad lei yikabel le'abel ha'meiteru yikabel le'loi klumi. Again, even by a statue, that he thought it was, if he thought it was a king, that's not avodah zarah at all. Ella me'hava me'yira. Ella ma'if me'hava me'yira. Hanich le'bayda me'chayil. Rabba me'pata ma'ik le'me'ma. Again, we come to the same conclusion. He thinks that it's in ganzen mutter. He thinks avodah zarah is mutter. Masha'enkim b'Shabbos the potter legamri. Legabi Shabbos, in that case, it'd be potter altogether. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll continue. I have to probably backtrack a little.